Welcome to the sixth video in this series, The Character of the Communist Mode Production According to Marx and Engels. Today we'll be going over the 1857 piece by Marx, the Grundrisse Notebook 1, the chapter on money. And to be clear, these are his notes in preparation for writing Capital. I've subtitled this, Communism Brings Free Association, Common Appropriation, and Control. This chapter explains in terms of communism as a distinct mode of production that the money form is incompatible with ending alienation and the like, with Marx attacking what he considers vulgar communism, which simply takes labor time and expresses it ways that account labor time under all the same relations as money. In addition, he talked about the history, dynamics, and construction of money both in its particular concrete form and the more abstract organization of it. In addition, he spoke about the distinction of communist production and distribution, which is not based on or mediated by exchange of exchange values, but of activities determined by communal needs and communal purposes, with communality presupposed as the basis of production, and distribution emerging out of production, and individual labor as being, quote, posited from the outset as social labor. The result of this is that an individual's labor is a share of communal production, and thus exchange and production for such never occurs. This destroys the basis of the social division of labor. He also discusses labor time as a component of labor, and notates the personal character of production. Marx responds to a series of economists' thoughts about a potential system wherein there is a central bank which does all planning, acting as both the general buyer and seller. It uses a bank chit which has no value. It lacks this character because it does not have exchange value. There is no open market, it only acts the same as a meal ticket or theater pass. It doesn't circulate in the general public, but instead only between the bank and its clients. The bank would then establish the exchange value of all commodities through an analysis of the socially average labor time materialized in them, and plan the amounts of commodities to be produced in what time, and organize production to maximize productivity by way of 1. Balancing and arranging the distribution of the means of labor. 2. Accounting for the average production time of any given commodity based on its industry and character. And 3. Determining the amount of labor time needed in any branch of production. As a general buyer and seller, social production would be structured so that the needs of the associated members are always satisfied. Rather than selling labor to the bank, instead, workers receive exchange value for the entire product of their labor. As such, the bank would now be the general buyer, seller, and producer as well. As Marx states, quote, either it would be a despotic ruler of production and trustee of distribution, or it would indeed be nothing more than a board which keeps the books and accounts for society producing in common. This system is vulgar communism, a naive labor theory of value that maintains value. While it does abolish money, it does not abolish exchange. He then discusses the social character of money. And to be clear here, what is being said here is the seeds for the solution rests in this, right? These are all the things that society must do, but it doesn't go far enough. And we'll talk more about what is necessary. He then discusses the social character of money. Money, in truth, necessarily presupposes objectification of the social bond through debt. The, quote, trust created is merely a dead pledge of society and symbolic property produced through alienated social relationships embodied into a thing. In a society where there's no money, trust and faith becomes the basis of relationships of people within communist society. Hoarding and thus greed becomes impossible without money, and drive for such accumulation becomes considered primitive. This is because there ceases a universal form of exchange, and value itself disappears, with exchange in all of its forms too. Accumulation is restricted by needs and the nature of products. As such, in a developed society with little needs, desire for such will appear primitive. Marx also discusses the historical development of the division of labor. 1. First, interpersonal dependence and divisions of labor develop. Second, personal independence based on those divisions of labor develop, and a system of general social metabolism, universal relations of an all-round needs and capacities, is formed. Third, free individuality in and through society as a communal, social productivity as social wealth, emerges out of the second phase. In this phase, ancient conditions disintegrate as commerce, luxury, money, and exchange value develops. For example, the patriarchal, feudal, and so on relation. Communism, through free association on the basis of common appropriation and control over the means of production, transcends these patriarchal, ancient, and feudal conditions, as the end of private exchange of products of labor makes it so there is no material, political, economic support for natural or political hierarchy of individuals. The participation of individuals in social production is not mediated by exchange of products, but instead from the independent production of individuals and through presupposition of production. In this case, that production is communal, with the labor of individuals automatically assumed as social labor, and thus all products being a share of the communal production. Thus, no one has any particular product to exchange, and it never takes on such a value form. This is the distinction right here between this society and that society. Rather than there being a division of labor, instead there's an organization of labor, wherein individuals participate, under the presumption of social labor, in communal consumption. Lastly, Marx explains the character of production among associated free producers. As noted above, because the, quote, central bank, which acts as a board and keeps the books and accounts for society producing in common, acts as the general, quote, buyer, seller, and producer, and must in turn balance and arrange distribution of the means of labor, account for the average production time of any given commodity based on its industry and character, and determine the amount of labor time needed in any branch of production. Production becomes directly social and no longer outside of man's control. Supply and demand is no longer useful for society. Statistics are used instead. Statistics will indirectly inform us of supply and demand, which is a post hoc realization in the market anyway. Social production becomes common wealth that is managed by all, and the communal character of production makes the products of society communal and general automatically. There ceases exchange of values in production. Instead, there is an exchange of activities. These activities are determined by communal needs and brings individuals into communal world of products. In capitalism, the social character of production is only recognized in the market. In communism, it is presupposed. This presupposition, the world of products and consumption, are not mediated by exchange, either of mutually independent laborers or producers of labor, but instead by the social conditions of production where the individual is active. In terms of specifics, in communal production, labor time determination is essential to recognize. Reductions in total required labor time allows for greater needs and wealth, and ultimately economization of time is the basis for all economy. Society must distribute its time to produce enough for its needs, through a planned distribution of labor time among the various branches of production. For the purpose of this planning, the labor of those in each different branch and particular forms of work are quantitatively and qualitatively distinct. Thus, the only comparison is the average within them. The labor of a weaver cannot be equated to the labor of a tailor, though capital does this through abstraction. And that is my summary of Marx's Grundrisse, Notebook 1, the chapter on money in terms of the character of the communist mode of production. If you'd like to go over the quotations that I derived this summary from, as always, please feel free to go into the description below and access the shared Google Doc containing this. And if you want to talk about it further, potentially consider joining the United Marxist Pact Discord server, also linked. Tomorrow we'll be going over the Grundrisse Notebook 7, the chapter on capital. Thanks for joining me for today's topical summary, and I hope to see you then.